The sound of thunder drowned out Zara Ellsworth's screams as her own brothers rode away, leaving her bleeding in the dirt while the storm clouds gathered like vultures overhead. She pressed her hand against the gushing wound in her side where the bullet had torn through flesh and muscle, watching through rain-blurred vision as the three men she had trusted most in this world disappeared into the gathering darkness without so much as a backward glance. The year was 1876, and Dalhart, Texas was still rough country where family meant everything, except when gold meant more. Zara had discovered their secret 2 days ago, hidden in the barn beneath loose floorboards. Her brothers, Thomas, William, and Jacob, had been stealing from their own ranch hands, skimming wages and selling cattle that belonged to neighboring spreads. When she confronted them that morning, demanding they make it right, Thomas had grabbed her arm so hard she felt the bruise forming instantly. They argued for hours, voices rising until William pulled his revolver. She never thought he would actually pull the trigger. She never thought they would leave her to die. The rain started as a drizzle, then became a downpour that soaked through her cotton dress and made her long, dark hair cling to her face. At 22 years old, Zara had survived harsh winters, scorching summers, and the death of both parents, but this betrayal cut deeper than any blade. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out and she collapsed again, her blood mixing with the mud and rainwater, creating a crimson trail that spread across the rocky ground. The world tilted sideways and she realized she was lying down, though she could not remember falling. Her fingers fumbled with the torn fabric of her dress, trying to staunch the bleeding, but the rain kept washing everything away. She thought about her mother, dead these past 5 years, and wondered if this was how it would end. Would anyone even find her body out here, 3 miles from the ranch house, in a gully that most folks avoided because of the rocky terrain? The storm was growing worse, the wind howling through the mesquite trees like something wild and angry. Lightning split the sky, and for a moment everything was bright as noon, then darkness crashed back down twice as heavy. Zara did not know how long she lay there, drifting in and out of consciousness. Minutes felt like hours, and hours might have been minutes. The rain never stopped, and neither did the bleeding. She thought she heard hoofbeats at one point but dismissed it as thunder. Then she heard them again, closer this time, and a voice calling out words she could not quite understand through the roar of the storm. Quinton Sterling had been riding fence lines when the storm hit, checking for breaks before the real bad weather arrived. His horse, a sturdy buckskin named Copper, had excellent instincts and suddenly veered south without prompting, ears pricked forward with interest. Quinton trusted his horse more than most people, so he gave Copper his head and let the animal pick the path. That was when he saw it, barely visible in the fading light and driving rain. A trail of blood, diluted by water but unmistakable, leading down into the gully. His heart kicked into a faster rhythm as he dismounted, ground tying Copper and following the crimson path on foot. Every instinct he had developed in his 26 years screamed that something was very wrong. Quinton had worked cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, had survived more than one gunfight, and had learned to read signs that most men would miss. This was fresh blood, lots of it, and whoever was bleeding would not last long in this weather. He found her crumpled at the bottom of the gully, her dress soaked through, and her skin pale as moonlight. For one terrible moment he thought she was already dead, but then he saw her chest rise with a shallow breath. Quinton dropped to his knees beside her, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he assessed the wound. Gunshot, through the side, still bleeding heavily. He stripped off his leather vest and pressed it against the injury, applying firm pressure while his other hand checked for an exit wound. There was one which was good, meant the bullet had passed clean through. "Can you hear me?" he asked, his voice cutting through the sound of rain. "I need you to stay with me." Zara's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glazed with pain. She saw a man leaning over her, dark hair plastered to his forehead, strong jaw set with determination, green eyes that held something she had not seen in a long time. Concern. Real, genuine concern for another human being. "Brothers," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "Left me." Quinton's expression hardened, but his hands remained gentle as he worked. "Do not try to talk. I'm going to get you out of here, but this is going to hurt. I need to stop this bleeding first." He pulled off his shirt despite the cold rain, wadding it up and using his belt to secure the makeshift bandage tight against both the entry and exit wounds. Zara cried out, her back arching with pain, but Quinton kept working. He had seen men die from wounds half as bad as this one, and he was not about to let this woman become another casualty of the harsh Texas plains. "What is your name?" he asked, partly to keep her conscious and partly because he needed to know. "Zara," she breathed. "Zara Ellsworth." The name meant something. Quinton had heard of the Ellsworth spread, a decent-sized ranch about 15 miles west of his own property. He had never met the family, but he knew they ran cattle and kept mostly to themselves. "Well, Miss Ellsworth, I am Quinton Sterling, and I give you my word that you are not going to die today." He lifted her as carefully as he could, cradling her against his bare chest to share body heat. Zara whimpered but did not scream, which told him she was tougher than she looked. Quinton carried her up the rocky slope, his boots slipping in the mud but his grip never faltering. Copper stood exactly where he had been left, patient as always, and Quinton managed to get himself into the saddle with Zara still in his arms. It was not easy, and he nearly lost his balance twice, but finally they were mounted and moving. The Sterling Ranch was closer than the Ellsworth place, and Zara needed medical attention immediately. Quinton urged Copper into a ground-eating lope, holding Zara secure against him while the storm raged around them. He could feel her shivering, her body going into shock, and he talked to her the entire ride, keeping her engaged and fighting. "Tell me about your brothers," he said. "Why would they leave you like this?" "Found out," Zara mumbled against his chest. "About the stealing. They were angry. William shot me. All of them rode away." Quinton felt rage kindle in his gut, hot and fierce. What kind of men shot their own sister and left her to bleed out in a storm? He had known some hard cases in his time, but this was beyond the pale. "They are not going to get away with this," he promised her. "But first we get you patched up." His ranch house appeared through the sheets of rain like a beacon. It was a modest structure, built from good timber and stone, with a wide porch and a solid roof. Quinton had built most of it himself over the past 3 years, slowly turning his inherited land into something that mattered. He rode right up to the front steps and dismounted with Zara still in his arms, kicking the door open and carrying her inside. The warmth hit them immediately. Quinton had banked the fire that morning before heading out, and the coals were still hot enough to provide heat. He laid Zara on his bed, the only bed in the single-room house, and immediately set about building up the fire. He needed hot water, clean cloth, and whiskey. Lots of whiskey. "This is going to be rough," he warned her as he began cutting away her ruined dress. He tried to be respectful, leaving her undergarments in place where possible, but he needed access to the wound. Zara was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow and rapid. Quinton worked quickly, heating water over the fire and gathering his limited medical supplies. He had sewn up men before, after bar fights and ranch accidents, but never anyone he cared about. The thought surprised him. He barely knew this woman, yet something about her fierce eyes and stubborn will to survive had already worked its way under his skin. He cleaned the wounds with hot water and whiskey, then threaded a needle with steady hands. The stitching took nearly an hour, careful work that required concentration and a delicate touch. Zara drifted in and out, sometimes crying out, sometimes falling into unconsciousness. Quinton talked to her through all of it, his voice low and soothing, telling her stories about copper and the ranch, and the time he had accidentally roped a mountain lion thinking it was a calf. When he finally tied off the last stitch, dawn was breaking outside. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and glittering with moisture. Quinton covered Zara with every blanket he owned, then collapsed into the chair beside the bed, exhausted but unwilling to leave her side. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, sunlight was streaming through the window and someone was calling his name. Quinton. Her voice was weak but clear. He jerked awake, immediately leaning forward to check her forehead for fever. She was warm but not dangerously so, and her eyes were focused properly for the first time since he had found her. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Like I got shot and left to die," Zara replied, and there was a hint of dark humor in her tone that made Quinton smile despite everything. "That is pretty accurate," he agreed. "You have been asleep for almost 8 hours. Do you think you could take some water?" She nodded, and he helped her sit up enough to drink from the tin cup he held to her lips. The water was cool and sweet, drawn from his well that morning, and Zara drank greedily until he pulled it away. "Not too much at once," he cautioned. "You need to ease into it." Zara looked around the small cabin, taking in the rough-hewn furniture, the stone fireplace, the shelves lined with books and supplies. "This is your place." "It is. Not much, but it is mine. You saved my life." It was not a question, just a statement of fact, heavy with meaning. Quinton met her eyes, those deep brown eyes that held pain and strength in equal measure. Anyone decent would have done the same. "My own brothers did not," Zara said bitterly. "They shot me and rode away like I was nothing, less than nothing. Then your brothers are cowards and worse." Quinton stood, moving to the stove to check on the broth he had simmering. "You need to eat something, build your strength back up. Then we can figure out what to do next." Over the next 3 days, Zara slowly regained her strength. Quinton proved to be a patient and attentive nurse, changing her bandages twice daily and making sure she ate regular meals. He slept on the floor near the fireplace, insisting she keep the bed, and never once made her feel uncomfortable or unsafe. They talked during those long hours, sharing stories about their lives. Zara told him about growing up on the ranch, about her mother who had loved poetry and her father who had taught her to ride before she could walk. She told him about how her brothers had changed after their father died 2 years ago, becoming harder and more selfish, obsessed with money and status. She told him about the morning she had confronted them, about the look in William's eyes right before he pulled the trigger. "I keep thinking I should have seen it coming," she said on the 3rd evening, watching the firelight dance across the ceiling from her position in bed. "But they are my brothers, were my brothers. I trusted them." Quinton sat in his chair, mending a bridle with strong, capable hands. "Trust is not a weakness, Zara. What they did, that is on them, not you, maybe." She was quiet for a moment. "What about you? You have this place all to yourself. No wife, no family." "My parents passed when I was 20, Quinton said. "Cholera outbreak swept through town. Left me this land and not much else. Been building it up ever since, piece by piece. As for a wife," he shrugged, "never found a woman who wanted to tie herself to a struggling rancher with more debt than cattle." "Their loss," Zara said softly, and when Quinton looked up, their eyes met and held. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. He saw her not as a victim or a burden, but as a woman of strength and courage. She saw him not as just a rescuer, but as a good man in a world that seemed increasingly short on such things. By the end of the first week, Zara was able to walk around the cabin with assistance. Quinton stayed close, ready to catch her if she stumbled, but she proved remarkably resilient. The wound was healing cleanly, no signs of infection, though it still caused her considerable pain. She insisted on helping with small tasks despite Quinton's protests, needing to feel useful rather than helpless. "You are supposed to be resting," he said when he found her attempting to wash dishes one morning. "I have been resting for days," Zara countered. "I am going to lose my mind if I just lie in bed staring at the ceiling." Quinton took the plate from her hands and gently guided her to the chair. "Then sit here and keep me company while I work. Tell me more about that chestnut mare you were training before all this happened." They fell into an easy rhythm, comfortable in each other's presence in a way that surprised them both. Zara found herself watching Quinton when he was not looking, noticing the way his shoulders moved when he worked, the concentration on his face when he was reading one of his books in the evening, the gentle way he handled everything from his horse to the injured barn cat he was nursing back to health. He was nothing like the rough cowboys she had known, nothing like her brothers. There was a kindness in him, a fundamental decency that shone through everything he did. Quinton was equally affected, though he tried to hide it. He found himself thinking about Zara at odd moments, wondering if she liked the stew he was making or if she was warm enough or if she was in pain. He loved the sound of her laugh, rare but genuine when it came. He loved how she asked him about his books and actually listened to his answers. He loved the way she looked at him sometimes, like he was something special instead of just an ordinary cowboy trying to make his way in the world. 2 weeks after he had found her bleeding in the gully, Zara broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "I need to go back home eventually. Face what happened. Figure out what comes next." Quinton was cleaning his rifle, but his hand stilled at her words. The thought of her leaving filled him with unexpected dread. "You do not have to rush into anything. Your brothers could still be dangerous." "Which is exactly why I cannot hide here forever." Zara stood, walking to the window to look out at the Texas plains stretching endlessly in all directions. "They tried to kill me once. They might try again if they think I am going to report them to the marshal." "Then we go to the marshal first," Quinton said firmly. "What they did is attempted murder. They should face justice." "With what proof?" "My word against theirs. 3 respected ranchers against their sister who might be accused of being hysterical or vengeful." Zara shook her head. "You do not know how this works, Quinton. In their eyes, I am just a woman. My testimony will not count for much. It counts to me." He set down the rifle and crossed to her, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "And I found you. I can testify to the wound, to the circumstances. That has to mean something." Zara turned to face him, and suddenly they were inches apart. She could see the green flecks in his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. "Why are you doing this? You could have dropped me at the doctor's office in town and walked away. Why are you still helping me?" Quinton raised his hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, rough and calloused but impossibly gentle. "Because from the moment I found you fighting to stay alive in that gully, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. Because you are brave and strong and you deserve better than what this world has given you. Because when I look at you, I see something worth fighting for." Zara's breath caught in her throat. "Quinton, I know it is too soon," he said quickly. I know you have been through hell, and the last thing you need is some cowboy making declarations. But I need you to know that you are not alone in this. Whatever you decide to do, wherever you decide to go, I am with you if you want me to be." Instead of answering with words, Zara rose up on her toes and kissed him. It was soft and tentative at first, a question more than a statement, but when Quinton's arms came around her, careful of her healing wound, she deepened the kiss and poured everything she was feeling into it. Gratitude, yes, but so much more than that. Hope, desire. The beginning of something that felt like it might be love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinton rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably talk about this later," Zara said. "Right now I just want to feel something good, something real." They spent the rest of that day together, talking and kissing and learning each other. Quinton told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to build something that would last, about hoping for a family someday. Zara told him about her love of horses, about wanting to breed and train them properly, about all the plans she had made before her brother's betrayal had shattered everything. "We could do it together," Quinton suggested tentatively. "If you wanted. The ranch, the horses, all of it." "Are you asking me to stay?" Zara's heart was pounding. "I am asking you to consider it. No pressure, no expectations. Just think about whether you might want to build something here with me." Zara looked around the small cabin that had become a sanctuary. She thought about going back to her family's ranch, to the place where her brothers had shot her and left her to die. She thought about starting over somewhere completely new, alone and vulnerable. Then she looked at Quinton, at this man who had saved her life and asked nothing in return, who treated her like an equal and looked at her like she was precious. "I want to stay," she said. "But first I need to face them, my brothers. I need to look them in the eye and tell them they did not break me, that I survived." "Then that is what we will do," Quinton agreed. Together. They rode out to the Ellsworth ranch 3 days later, Zara on one of Quinton's spare horses, since she had no idea what had happened to her own mount. The journey took most of the morning, and with each mile Zara felt her anxiety building. What would she say? What would they do? Quinton rode beside her, solid and reassuring, his rifle in its scabbard and his revolver on his hip. He had made it clear that he was not going to let anything happen to her. The Ellsworth ranch house was a sprawling structure, more impressive than Quinton's modest cabin, but somehow cold and unwelcoming. They had barely reached the yard when the front door opened and 3 men stepped out. Zara's brothers. Thomas, the eldest at 28 with his sandy hair and calculating eyes. William, 25, the one who had pulled the trigger, looking thinner than she remembered. Jacob, just 24, the youngest of her brothers, who at least had the decency to look ashamed. Zara. Thomas's voice was flat, emotionless. "We thought you were dead. You left me to die," Zara replied, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "You shot me and rode away." "That was an accident," William protested, but his eyes would not meet hers. "Things got out of hand. We came back to look for you, but you were gone. Liar." The word cracked like a whip. "You left me bleeding in a storm and never looked back. I would be dead if not for Quinton." The 3 brothers looked at Quinton for the first time, sizing him up. He stared back, his expression neutral but his posture ready for anything. "This is family business," Thomas said. "It does not concern you, stranger." "It concerns me the moment you shot an unarmed woman and left her to die," Quinton replied evenly. "That is not family business. That is attempted murder." Jacob stepped forward, his face anguished. "Zara, we were wrong. I know we were wrong. I wanted to go back, but Thomas said it was too late, that you were already dead and searching would only implicate us. I have been sick over it every day since." "Not sick enough to ride into town and confess," Zara said, but her anger at Jacob was less than toward the other 2. She could see genuine remorse in his eyes. "We can work this out," Thomas said, his tone taking on a wheedling quality. "You are alive. That is what matters. Come back home, let us put this behind us." "So you can finish what William started." Zara shook her head. "I am not that foolish. I came here to tell you that I know what you did. I know about the stealing, about the cattle rustling, about all of it, and I want my share of the ranch. Mother and father left it to all of us equally, and I am taking what is mine." "The hell you are," William snarled, his hand moving toward his gun. Quinton's rifle was up and aimed before William could clear leather. "I would not if I were you." The tableau held for a long, tense moment. Then Thomas raised his hand slowly. "Easy now. Nobody needs to die today. William, stand down." When his brother reluctantly complied, Thomas turned back to Zara. "What exactly do you want?" "My quarter of the ranch. In cash or cattle, I do not care which. You have 1 month to get it together. If I do not receive what I am owed, I go to the marshal with everything I know." "You do that. You destroy this family," Thomas said. "You destroyed this family when you decided money was more important than your own sister's life." Zara's voice was hard as iron. 1 month. Do not make me come back here again." They rode away without looking back, and Zara did not realize she was shaking until they were a mile down the road. Quinton called a halt and helped her down from her horse, holding her while she cried for the family she had lost, for the brothers who had chosen greed over love, for the innocence that could never be recovered. "You did good," Quinton murmured into her hair. "You were so strong." "I do not feel strong," Zara admitted. "I feel broken." "Broken things can heal," he said. "I am living proof of that." They made it back to Quinton's ranch by evening, and Zara felt some of the tension drain away as soon as the familiar cabin came into view. This was home now, she realized. Not the grand ranch house where she had grown up, but this small, warm space that smelled like coffee and leather and safety. The month passed slowly. Zara continued to heal, the wound closing into a scar that would always remind her of that terrible day. She and Quinton fell into a rhythm of domestic life that felt both foreign and completely natural. They worked together to repair fences, tend the small herd of cattle, care for the horses. Zara proved to be as skilled as she had claimed, with an almost magical ability to calm even the most fractious horse. In the evenings they would sit together, sometimes reading, sometimes just talking. Quinton taught her to play chess on a battered board he had carved himself. Zara taught him some of the poetry her mother had loved. They kissed often, tender moments that sometimes turned heated but always stopped before going too far. Quinton was determined to do right by her, to marry her properly before taking things further. Zara found his old-fashioned honor both frustrating and endearing. "I am not made of glass," she told him one night when he pulled away from a particularly intense kiss. "I will not break." "I know," Quinton said, his breathing ragged, "but you deserve better than to be rushed. When we take that step, I want it to be as husband and wife. I want to be able to give you everything you deserve." "You already have," Zara said softly. "You gave me my life back. You gave me hope. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again." "Marry me then," Quinton said suddenly. "I know I should do this properly with a ring and a formal proposal, but I cannot wait another moment. Marry me, Zara. Build a life here with me. Have children with me. Grow old with me. Let me spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." Zara laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Dalhart, with half the town in attendance. Zara's brothers did not come, though Jacob sent a letter with a bank draft for her share of the ranch. It was less than she was owed, but Zara decided to accept it and move on. Holding on to anger would only poison her future, and she had too much to look forward to. Quinton had used the last of his savings to buy her a simple gold band, and Zara thought it was more beautiful than any diamond ring could have been. She wore her best dress, a blue calico that matched her eyes, and carried wildflowers that Quinton had picked that morning. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinton kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the congregation sighed audibly. The first night in their cabin as a married couple was everything Zara had dreamed of and more. Quinton was gentle and patient, making sure she felt nothing but pleasure despite the lingering tenderness of her wound. They loved each other with a passion that burned away the last shadows of pain and fear, replacing them with joy and hope and a deep, abiding connection. "I love you," Zara whispered in the darkness, curled against Quinton's chest. "I never thought I would say those words and mean them, but I do. I love you so much." "I love you too," Quinton replied, his arms tightening around her. "From that first moment I found you, fighting to survive against impossible odds. I think some part of me knew you were going to change my life forever." The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Zara's skill with horses became known throughout the region, and people came from miles around to have her train their animals. Quinton expanded the cattle herd and built a proper barn. Together they added on to the cabin, creating a real home with multiple rooms and a porch where they could sit and watch the sunset. 14 months after their wedding, Zara gave birth to their first child, a healthy baby boy with his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Samuel after Quinton's father. Quinton was present for the birth, holding Zara's hand and whispering encouragement, and when the doctor placed their son in his arms, Zara saw tears streaming down her husband's face. "He is perfect," Quinton breathed. "You are perfect. Thank you for giving me this." "We made him together," Zara said, exhausted but radiant. "This is just the beginning, my love." 2 years later came their daughter Lily, with Zara's brown eyes and a disposition so sweet it made everyone smile. Then, 3 years after that, another son, James, who proved to be as stubborn and determined as his mother. The cabin that had once been home to a lonely cowboy now rang with laughter and the sounds of children playing. Zara occasionally heard news of her brothers. Thomas had married a banker's daughter and moved to Denver. William had been arrested for cattle rustling and spent 2 years in prison before disappearing into the territories. Jacob alone stayed in Dalhart, and one day, 5 years after Zara's wedding, he appeared at their door. He was thinner than she remembered, with new lines around his eyes that spoke of hard living and regret. "I know I have no right to be here," he said quietly, "but I needed to see you, to tell you in person how sorry I am for what we did, for what I did not do." Zara stood in the doorway, her youngest child on her hip, and studied the brother who had once been her friend. She could see genuine remorse in his expression, a pain that mirrored her own. "Why now?" "Because I have spent 5 years trying to live with what happened, and I cannot do it anymore," Jacob said. "I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I just needed you to know that what we did, what I allowed to happen, it has haunted me every single day." Quinton appeared behind Zara, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder. The gesture was protective but not aggressive, leaving the decision to her. "I forgive you," Zara said finally. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I am not going to carry that anger anymore, Jacob. I have too much good in my life now." Jacob's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but thank you." "Would you like to meet your niece and nephews?" Zara asked, and the hope that flooded Jacob's face was answer enough. He became a regular visitor after that, never overstaying his welcome, but always welcomed nonetheless. He brought gifts for the children and helped with ranch work when needed. He never tried to justify what his brothers had done, and he never made excuses for his own cowardice. Slowly, tentatively, he and Zara rebuilt some semblance of a relationship, not what they had once had but something new and honest. The children grew up healthy and happy, surrounded by love and the wide open spaces of the Texas plains. Samuel proved to have his father's steady temperament and became an excellent cattleman. Lily developed her mother's gift with horses and could ride before she could read. James was the wild one, always getting into scrapes and adventures, but with a good heart that shone through his mischief. On their 10th anniversary, Quinton surprised Zara with a trip to Dallas, the furthest either of them had traveled since their wedding. They stayed in a fancy hotel and ate in restaurants, and attended a theater performance that left Zara breathless with delight. But the best part was simply being together, walking hand in hand through the city streets, remembering how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" Quinton asked one evening as they sat on the hotel balcony watching the sun set over the unfamiliar skyline. "Staying with me instead of going somewhere bigger, doing something more," Zara took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Not for a single moment. You gave me everything I ever wanted, Quinton. A home, a family, love, purpose. I would not trade this life for anything in the world. Even after everything you went through, the pain, the betrayal, especially because of that," Zara said firmly. "It taught me what really matters, not blood or money or status, but the choices we make and the people we choose to love. You chose me when I was at my lowest. You saw something worth saving when I thought I was beyond help. That is the kind of love that changes everything." They returned home to a ranch that felt more prosperous than ever. The children had stayed with their Uncle Jacob, who had proven to be a surprisingly capable and devoted guardian in their parents' absence. The house was clean, the animals were cared for, and Jacob had even started repairs on the old shed that had been leaning dangerously for months. As the years continued to pass, the Sterling Ranch became known throughout Texas as a place of quality cattle and exceptional horses. Zara's reputation grew, and she began writing articles for agricultural journals about horse training techniques, sharing the knowledge she had accumulated over decades of work. Quinton served a term as the local representative to the Territorial Assembly, advocating for fair treatment of small ranchers and homesteaders. Their children grew into adulthood. Samuel married a school teacher from town and settled on a portion of the ranch that Quinton and Zara deeded to him. Lily married a horse breeder from New Mexico, and together they established a breeding program that became legendary. James, true to his adventurous nature, joined the Texas Rangers for a time before eventually returning home to take over the main ranch operations. Zara's hair began to show streaks of silver, and Quinton's face developed deep lines from years of work in the sun, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with each passing year, tempered by shared struggles and sweetened by shared triumphs. They were partners in every sense of the word, equal and devoted. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party that brought together people from all over the state. Friends, neighbors, business associates, and family all gathered to celebrate the couple who had built something extraordinary from nothing. Jacob gave a speech that had half the audience in tears, talking about redemption and second chances and the sister who had taught him what true strength looked like. 25 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I stood by while my brothers hurt the person I should have been protecting. I thought I had destroyed any chance of being part of a real family. But Zara, you gave me that chance anyway. You forgave the unforgivable. And Quinton, You welcomed me when you had every right to turn me away. The two of you showed me what love really means, what family really means. Thank you for that gift." As the party continued around them, Quinton pulled Zara aside to a quiet corner of the porch. "Do you remember the night I proposed?" he asked. "I told you I wanted to spend every day for the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." "I remember," Zara said, smiling, "and you have." "I am not done yet," Quinton said. "I plan to spend the next 25 years doing the same thing, and the 25 after that if God grants us the time." "Then I guess you better get started," Zara replied, pulling him in for a kiss that felt as electric and thrilling as their first. The years continued to roll past like the endless Texas plains, marked by seasons of plenty and seasons of hardship, by joy and sorrow in equal measure. They welcomed grandchildren, 14 in total, and the ranch house that Quinton had built with his own hands echoed with young voices once again. Zara taught her grandchildren to ride just as she had taught her own children, and Quinton told them stories of the old days, carefully editing out the more dangerous parts, but never hiding the truth of how he and their grandmother had found each other. On a warm spring evening in 1912, 36 years after that fateful storm, Zara and Quinton sat together on their porch swing, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. They were both in their 60s now, their bodies bearing the marks of a life fully lived, but their hands were still clasped together just as they had been for decades. "I never get tired of this view," Zara said softly. "Neither do I," Quinton replied, but he was looking at her instead of the sunset. "Best decision I ever made, following Copper's instincts that day. Best decision of my life." "My brothers thought they were leaving me to die," Zara mused. "They thought they were ending my story. Instead, they gave me the chance to start a new one, a better one, with you. No regrets then." "Only that I cannot live this life twice," Zara said. "Once does not feel like enough." Quinton squeezed her hand. "Then we better make sure we savor every moment we have left." They sat together as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Around them, the ranch they had built together hummed with life and purpose. Their children's children played in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The cattle lowed contentedly in the pasture, and the horses nickered softly in the barn that Zara had designed and Quinton had built. It was not the life Zara had been born into, not the future she had once imagined for herself. It was so much better. From the moment Quinton had found her trail of blood in that storm-ravaged gully, from the instant he had decided that her life was worth saving, everything had changed. He had given her more than survival. He had given her hope, purpose, partnership, and a love that had sustained her through every challenge and celebrated every triumph. As the moon rose full and bright over the Texas plains, casting silver light across the land they had tamed together, Zara leaned her head on Quinton's shoulder and smiled. She was home, truly home, in every way that mattered. The wound her brothers had inflicted had long since healed into just another scar, a reminder of where she had been but not a limitation on where she could go. She had been left to die in a storm, but instead she had been found by a cowboy with a good heart and steady hands, a man who had seen her worth when she could barely see it herself. And from that terrible night had grown something beautiful and enduring, a love story written across the wild Texas landscape, measured not in grand gestures but in quiet moments of devotion, in shared labor and shared dreams, in children raised and grandchildren cherished, in promises kept and faith rewarded. It was everything she had never dared to hope for, and more than she could ever have imagined. The trail of blood that Quinton had followed that storm-tossed evening had led him to Zara, and it had led her to a future brighter than any sunset, richer than any gold, and more precious than anything her brothers had ever stolen or fought over. She had survived, and in surviving, she had found not just life but a reason to live it fully. She had found love in its truest, deepest form, and it had made all the difference.